Sheila had performed with Prince for over a decade, survived his legendary perfectionism, and learned to read his silences better than most people read words. But on this night in 1987, standing backstage at the Oakland Coliseum, she felt something different in the air, a tension that had nothing to do with the show. Prince had been unusually quiet during sound check, his mind clearly somewhere else. And now, with the crowd's roar building to a crescendo and the stage manager counting down the final minutes, he was nowhere to be found. Has anyone seen him? The question rippled through the crew like electricity. Wardrobe had his costume ready. Lighting had his cues programmed. The band was tuned and waiting. But the man himself, the 5'2" genius who could command a stadium with nothing but a guitar and his presence, had disappeared into the labyrinth of backstage corridors. What happened next would become one of those stories that gets whispered in green rooms and tour buses, passed down from one generation of musicians to the next. Not because it was scandalous or shocking, but because it revealed a side of Prince that the world rarely got to see. The side that existed when the spotlights went dark and the purple persona faded away, leaving only a man who understood something profound about why any of them were there in the first place. If you want to hear more untold stories about the legends who shaped music history, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. These are the moments that never made it into the documentaries, the human connections that happened when the cameras weren't rolling. Warner Brothers executives were in the audience. Music journalists from Rolling Stone and Spin had their notepads ready, and MTV cameras were positioned throughout the venue. This wasn't just another concert. This was the night Prince would prove that he could fill stadiums without the revolution, that his artistic vision could stand entirely on its own terms. The pressure was immense, the stakes were impossibly high, and Prince had vanished. Sheila stood near the stage entrance, her hands wrapped around her drumsticks, watching the crew descend into controlled chaos. She'd seen Prince pull mysterious disappearing acts before, but never 5 minutes before showtime. Never when this much was riding on a single performance. The stage manager was speaking rapidly into his headset, his face flushed with panic. Security guards were fanning out through the backstage maze of corridors and dressing rooms. The lighting director was rechecking cues for the third time, trying to look busy while his mind raced through worst-case scenarios. And the crowd, oblivious to the backstage crisis, was growing louder, more insistent, their energy building toward that explosive moment when the lights would drop and the show would begin. Except there was no show to begin. Not without Prince. 4 minutes to showtime. The backstage area had transformed into something resembling a military operation. Every dressing room door was being opened, every equipment closet checked, every corridor systematically searched. Sheila watched as Prince's tour manager grabbed a security guard by the arm and issued rapid-fire instructions. Check the parking lot. Check the tour buses. Check every bathroom in this building. I don't care if you have to open every door between here and the street. Find him. Sheila made a decision. While everyone else was checking the obvious places, she would trust her instincts. The same instincts that had allowed her to anticipate Prince's musical choices for over 10 years. She thought about the man she knew, not the purple-clad persona the world saw, but the human being who occasionally let his guard down during long tour bus rides and late-night recording sessions. Where would he go when the weight of expectation became too heavy? Where would Prince retreat when he needed to remember why he'd chosen this impossible life in the first place? The answer came to her with surprising clarity. She turned away from the chaos near the stage entrance and headed deeper into the venue's infrastructure, past the VIP lounges and corporate suites, toward the older sections of the Oakland Coliseum that most performers never saw. Her heels clicked against concrete floors as she navigated corridors that grew progressively more institutional, less glamorous. The sound of the crowd was fainter here, muffled by layers of concrete and steel. She passed janitor closets and electrical rooms, maintenance offices and storage areas, following nothing but intuition and a decade's worth of understanding about how Prince's mind worked under pressure. 3 minutes to showtime. And there, at the end of the corridor, she saw a door slightly ajar, warm light spilling through the crack. She approached quietly, years of performing together having taught her when to make noise and when to move like a ghost. Through the narrow opening, she could see Prince sitting on a bench in what appeared to be an old locker room, long since abandoned by whatever sports teams had once used it. His purple jacket was folded neatly beside him. His ruffled white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, and in front of him, sitting on the same bench, was a young man in a wheelchair. The young man couldn't have been more than 19 or 20 years old. He wore an Oakland Athletics cap and a worn leather jacket that had seen better years. His legs were motionless beneath a blanket, and his hands rested on the wheelchair's armrests with the careful stillness of someone who'd learned to conserve energy. Prince was leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, speaking in a voice so low that Sheila couldn't make out the words. But she could see the young man's face, and what she saw there stopped her from interrupting. The kid was crying, tears streaming down his cheeks, but he was also smiling. This impossible combination of grief and joy that transformed his features into something almost transcendent. Sheila stayed in the corridor, hidden in shadows, watching something she instinctively understood she wasn't meant to see. Whatever was happening in that abandoned locker room wasn't for public consumption. This wasn't a photo opportunity or a publicity stunt. This was something else entirely. Something that existed in the space between the person Prince had to be on stage and the person he actually was when nobody was watching. 2 minutes to showtime. Sheila could hear voices approaching from behind her, security guards calling Prince's name, the search party getting closer. She had maybe 30 seconds before they reached this corridor, before they would burst into that locker room and drag Prince back to the stage. And in that moment, Sheila faced a choice that would define everything she thought she understood about loyalty and responsibility. Sheila chose differently. She stepped into the corridor's center, blocking the path, her body language radiating a confidence that had been earned through thousands of performances and countless battles for artistic respect in a male-dominated industry. When the security guards appeared around the corner, she raised one hand, her voice calm, but absolutely firm. "He's not down here. I already checked. Try the production offices on the north side." The guards hesitated, clearly uncertain. Sheila E. wasn't just another band member. She was a star in her own right, someone whose judgment carried weight, whose word meant something. They looked at each other, then nodded and headed back the way they'd come, speaking into their radios about redirecting the search. Sheila waited until their footsteps faded completely before turning back to the locker room door. Through the gap, she could see Prince standing now, his hand extended toward the young man in the wheelchair. They were shaking hands, but it wasn't a casual gesture. Prince held the grip for a long moment, his other hand covering their joined hands, saying something that made the young man nod vigorously, those tears still flowing but the smile growing even wider. Then Prince retrieved his purple jacket, slipped it on with practiced efficiency, and adjusted his collar with the kind of precise attention to detail that characterized everything he did. 1 minute to showtime. Prince emerged from the locker room and found Sheila standing in the corridor. For a moment, they just looked at each other, years of musical partnership and mutual understanding passing between them without need for words. Then Prince spoke, his voice quiet but steady. "His name is Marcus. He's been in that wheelchair since a car accident 2 years ago. Used to play drums." He paused, and Sheila saw something in his eyes she'd rarely witnessed, a vulnerability that the purple persona never allowed. "His friends brought him here tonight. They saved up for 6 months to afford the tickets. But the venue staff wouldn't let him use the accessible entrance because his ticket was for general admission. They told him he'd have to watch from the parking lot on a monitor through a window, like he didn't deserve to be inside with everyone else. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that went far beyond logistics and venue policies. Sheila understood immediately why Prince had disappeared, why he'd abandoned his own show with minutes to spare. Because somewhere in the process of becoming a superstar, of building this massive touring apparatus and satisfying record label demands and living up to impossible expectations, Prince had never forgotten what it felt like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to be told you didn't belong in spaces that claimed to be for everyone. Prince continued, his voice gaining strength. So, I walked out there and found him, sitting in that parking lot with his friends, trying to pretend he was okay with watching through a window. And I told him something my father told me when I was 7 years old. And some music teacher said I was too small to play trumpet in the school band. He paused again, and Sheila could see him making a decision about how much to reveal, how far to pull back the curtain that separated the icon from the human being. My father said that nobody gets to decide what you're capable of except you. Nobody gets to tell you where you belong except your own heart. And if somebody builds a door that's too small for you to walk through, then you find a window, or you build your own door, or you kick down the wall if you have to. The sound of the crowd was a physical presence now. 53,000 voices unified in expectation, their chanting creating vibrations that traveled through the concrete and steel of the venue's infrastructure. Prince checked his watch, that precise attention to timing reasserting itself. Marcus is watching from the VIP section now. His friends are with him. And after the show, he's coming backstage, and I'm giving him a set of drumsticks, and I'm telling him exactly what my father told me. He looked at Sheila directly, and she saw something in that gaze that explained so much about why Prince pushed himself so relentlessly, why he fought for control with such desperate intensity, why he could never quite be satisfied with what he'd already accomplished. Because talent doesn't need permission, and dignity isn't something anybody else can give you or take away. You either claim it or you don't. 30 seconds to showtime. Prince walked past Sheila toward the stage, his movements transforming with each step, the purple persona reassembling itself like armor preparing for battle. By the time they reached the backstage staging area, the chaos had given way to relieved celebration. This wasn't a man who'd been irresponsible or careless. This was someone who'd made a calculated choice, who'd weighed what mattered against what was merely important, and who decided that human dignity trumped show business logistics every single time. The lights dropped, the crowd exploded, and Prince walked onto that stage in Oakland with something extra in his performance that night. A fierce joy that transcended technique and showmanship. Sheila watched from her position behind the drum kit as Prince tore through Sign of the Times with an intensity that bordered on religious fervor. She saw him glance up at the VIP section during The Cross, saw the subtle nod he gave to someone up there in the darkness. And she understood that what had happened in those missing minutes hadn't just been about one young man in a wheelchair. It had been about everything Prince believed regarding who deserved to be seen, who deserved to be heard, who deserved to matter in a world that was often casual and thoughtless in its cruelty. The show ran 2 hours and 47 minutes, 17 minutes longer than scheduled. Prince encored 3 times, pushing himself and the band to places they hadn't known they could reach. The Warner Brothers executives gave standing ovations. The music journalists filled their notepads with superlatives. MTV captured footage that would be replayed for decades. And backstage, after the final curtain, Prince kept his promise. Marcus came to the dressing room area, surrounded by his friends, all of them still buzzing with adrenaline from what they'd witnessed. Prince gave him a set of drumsticks, the same ones he'd used during the recording of Purple Rain. And he spoke to Marcus for 20 minutes about music and determination and the difference between what people tell you is possible and what you can actually achieve when you refuse to accept their limitations. Years later, after Prince's death, Sheila would tell versions of this story in interviews and documentaries. But she would always leave out the most important details, the specifics that felt too sacred to share with casual audiences looking for gossip and scandal. She would talk about Prince's generosity without mentioning Marcus by name, about his humanitarian instincts without describing that abandoned locker room, about his deep empathy without revealing the tears she'd seen streaming down that young man's face. Some moments were meant to remain private, protected from the machinery of fame and publicity that could reduce profound human connection to mere anecdote. The Oakland Coliseum show became legendary among Prince fans and music historians, but for reasons that had nothing to do with what actually mattered. Critics praised the technical virtuosity and stage production. Fans celebrated the expanded set list and extended encores. Industry professionals marveled at the commercial success and critical acclaim. But the real story, the one that revealed who Prince actually was when stripped of all pretense and performance, remained mostly hidden. Marcus went on to become a music teacher, working with young people who'd been told they couldn't pursue their dreams because of physical limitations or economic disadvantages or societal prejudices. He kept those drumsticks in his classroom, mounted on the wall where every student could see them, a tangible reminder that talent and determination could overcome obstacles that seemed insurmountable. Prince never publicized what he'd done that night, never mentioned it in interviews or used it for promotional purposes. The gesture existed purely for its own sake, uncontaminated by ulterior motives or strategic calculations. That was perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the entire incident. In an industry built on image management and carefully curated public personas, Prince had taken precious minutes before his biggest show to connect with someone nobody else would have noticed. Someone the venue's infrastructure had actively excluded. Someone whose story would never make headlines or generate revenue. Sheila carried the memory of that night through the rest of her career, through her own battles for recognition and respect in the music industry, through moments when she had to choose between what was convenient and what was right. She thought about Prince standing in that abandoned locker room, his purple jacket folded beside him, speaking to Marcus with the same intensity he brought to his musical performances. And she understood that greatness wasn't really about technical skill or commercial success or critical acclaim. It was about maintaining your humanity while operating at the highest levels of achievement. It was about remembering that every person you encountered carried their own story, their own struggles, their own quiet hope that somebody might see them as they actually were, rather than as society had decided they should be. The minutes Prince disappeared that night weren't a crisis or a professional lapse. They were a choice, a deliberate prioritization of human connection over commercial obligation. And in making that choice, in walking away from the stage to sit with someone who'd been made invisible by systemic indifference, Prince revealed the foundation of everything he'd built across his extraordinary career. The purple clothes and the mysterious symbol and the battles for artistic control. They all traced back to this fundamental belief that everyone deserved to be seen, everyone deserved to be heard, everyone deserved to claim their own space in a world that was constantly trying to make certain people disappear.